Hello and welcome to On the Kerbs IndyCar. I'm one of your hosts, Thiemo Albers-Daly. Nate and I recorded a bumper episode recently going through all of the IndyCar news from the last few weeks. As it was quite a lengthy one, we've decided to split it up into a few more easily digestible parts. So here's part one, and in it, Nate and I will be chatting all about the recent IndyCar driver announcements. We hope you enjoy.
I'm your host, Nate Woods, and I am joined once again by my co-host, Thiemo Albers-Daly. Thiemo, how we doing?
Not too bad, thank you, Mr. Woods. How about yourself? It's been a minute.
It has been a few weeks since we've gotten some more news to report in IndyCar and Indy Next, and we're here to bring it to everybody in one little condensed package.
Yeah, otherwise this would have turned into like 50 mini episodes of about 2-3 minutes each, and nobody needs that.
Yeah. And it's funny because I was doing show prep, and I was like going back through news stories, and I'm like, feels like we still have several holes in the teams. I'm like, because I'm looking at the driver news and who signed with who and who's going where and who's got contract extensions, and I'm like, well, surely the field is full at this point. And I'm like, no, there's still we can't do a here's the field for the 2026 season yet because we just don't know. There's still so many. Where's Connor Daly going? We don't know yet.
Yeah, that was the other side of the coin that I was looking at, because on my side I was thinking, have we not talked about a lot of these items already? But then I just realised, no, that's just you and I back and forth outside
Yeah,
of the podcast. Whenever news breaks, we obviously then talk about it a little bit if it's something that we weren't necessarily expecting or a little bit left field. And I go, oh no, we haven't talked about the IndyCar calendar yet. It's been out a while, and we've made comments about it, but we haven't actually talked about it properly.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I just need to remind myself that this is all stuff we haven't technically talked about yet,
yeah,
so it's still sort of
yeah.
fresh.
And there was an exciting announcement in the calendar. We talked about the Markham race when it was announced, and kind
Hmm.
of like, this. I wasn't sure how I felt about that, but there was an addition to the calendar that we'll get to that I am very excited about. So, but first, let's talk about driver news. You know,
We have a bit of it.
we have a good amount of it, and we'll just start it off. I think there was, we talked about previously, Will Power's move. There was kind of that 3 day section where there was a bunch of moves that happened all at once. You had Will Power that was moving to Andretti, and then I think immediately after that, we were talking about that, and then we had an episode, and then in classic fashion, as soon as we put it on an episode, there's big news that happens. And I think the next chip to fall was that David Malukas was moving over to Penske to take Will Power's spot.
And look, this is only ever a matter of time. This is probably one of the talking points that we'll have the least to say about, because we've talked about it more or less all of 2025 up to now. It's just now official. Not
Yeah.
surprising. It's good to finally see that piece of the jigsaw fit. It's sort of going, you've got a jigsaw of someone's face, and you've just got that little bit left on the nose, but you know who it is. You go, oh, that's who that is. That's okay. I had no idea until now who was going there. So everyone pretends to be shocked, but it's just business as usual. I think for me, the more interesting slash frustrating news was that Jack Harvey is back. Kind of. He's going to compete in the Indy 500 next year with Graham Reinbold. And don't get me wrong, I love to see that for Jack Harvey, but I just wish it was a full time seat. And I
Yeah.
fear that the longer this goes on for, the less likely it's going to happen.
You know, I would be interested to find out what his contract with Fox is.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Is he making more money being a broadcaster than he is a a race car driver at
Given the
this point.
motorsport world with racing drivers and how you need to be at the top end of a lot of things to even sort of break even a lot of time, I wouldn't be surprised, you know.
Yeah. Well, I have to make the comparison between him and Martin Brundle because they are essentially performing the same task in different series. And
Hmm.
you're like, Martin Brundle has probably made 100 times more doing grid walks in F1 than he ever did as an F1 driver.
Definitely considered the era of F1 that he was in, where you'd often have to be dealing with several people
Yeah.
trying to outdeal each other behind the scenes just so you can get
Yeah.
into a seat in the first
Yeah.
place. So yeah, it's not a bad pitch, but I just also think there is that part of Jack that is not done with racing yet.
He
Otherwise, he
wants
wouldn't
to.
be in the Indy
Race car
500.
drivers always want to be race car drivers.
Hmm. So I'm curious how big that potential pull of the Fox contract is to do the other side of the motorsport role in that capacity, and what it would take for someone to, I don't even want to say take a chance on him full time because he's he's not a bad driver. He just hasn't had the equipment, I feel like, to properly demonstrate what he can do some of the time. And we see that so often, it's so frustrating. And there's no one else on this list so far that we're about to run through that I'm frustrated is there. But I think that also shows the other problem, which is that there is so much good competition out there that finding a full time seat is not as easy as maybe it
Yeah.
could or should be in any
But
other year.
and a lot of these smaller teams like Dreyer and Reinbold, they have to, every team wants to find the next Alex Palou.
Hmm.
They want to be that team that says, okay, we brought this driver in. He won us a couple races. That legitimizes us as a team, even though he might move on to Andretti or he might move on to Penske. They want to be the ones that bring that driver in. And but at the end of the day, these smaller teams also have to be like, okay, we only have X number of dollars. Can we take a chance on this prospect and hope that it pans out, or do we pick a known entity that we know, you know, has X number of races under their belt. We know how they can perform. We've worked with them in the past, and we know how we can operate together. And I think that will probably played a really big role in Brian Reinbold coming out and saying, "All right, we're going to go ahead and we're taking Jack Harvey for the 500 because we know what he's capable of, and we want to get him before anybody else has a chance to pick him up."
Hmm. Yeah, it just then adds that extra bit of pressure if you're not guaranteed any other drives for the season to do well in the 500. And we've seen even this season that these one-off drivers, regardless of what their futures would have looked like at that point in time, if they were angling for a return to IndyCar or if they were just doing it because they could, you can be out lap one, turn one, and that's going to be through no fault of your own. And then what do you do with that? That's your one opportunity to prove yourself. And through the racing gods just deciding, not today, mate, you're done. And that's going to then maybe decide your future for you, which is why that's frustrating. But the point you made about these teams slightly lower down the pecking order, for lack of a better term, looking to at least be the first team to bring X driver in and go, they're probably not going to stay with us, but you saw them here first in IndyCar, a little bit like Alfa Romeo had with Leclerc for his first season in Formula One.
Yeah.
You knew he wasn't going to stay there, but you had the privilege of saying, we brought him, guys. We got him here. I
Yeah.
feel like that's what Dale Coyne are doing with Dennis Hauger. That obviously got announced as well. This was also pretty much of a given, but it was good to see him making that step up for next year. I think they as a team showed potential in this last season we just
Mhm.
had,
Oh yeah.
and because of their sort of underdog characteristics as a team, and because Dennis Hauger, despite having that dominant Indy next season, is still also a little bit on the rebound in terms of redemption from his F2, not less F3 days because he dominated there, but it's definitely his F2 days. I like this pairing, and it gives me something really solid to root for in terms of maybe what you had with Malukas
Yeah.
this year. Didn't quite pan out the way you wanted it to, but it was nice to have that
Yeah.
kind of, there's something here, I can feel the potential. I'd really
Yeah.
like to see that come to fruition.
Yeah. But and back to, you brought up Dave Lucas again, going back to him with Penske. I think, you know, that's probably a multi-year deal. We don't have particulars on that deal, I don't
Hmm.
believe,
I'd be
but
surprised if you did all of this just to bring him in for a year.
yeah. And but this is kind of a real make or break season for him. We've seen all of this potential in him, whether it was at uh, Foyt or the other teams that he was at coming up, and it was like his potential jump to Aaron McLaren was high on
Hmm.
him 2 seasons ago, and unfortunate that that didn't work out because of an injury in the offseason, but
Another
now
reason not to get into cycling.
now exactly we're finally going to get to see him in top equipment, and I I would love to say, okay, this is going to be a breakout season for him. He's finally going to get that first win,
You're
and
cautious
but
after this year, but
I am, but it's like he has to step up and he has to be able to perform and he has to be able to run with his teammates in effect. I mean, this was obviously a very down year for Penske, and to say the
it's
least.
mildly.
Yeah, and uh, you know. I don't think Malukas is going to be able to turn that team around. I think as a whole, that team will do it, but uh, you know, I'm apprehensive about this season for him because it's
I'm
like
not.
as high as I've been on David Malukas for the last 3 seasons, I'm just like, oh, it would break my heart if he got out there and was the last one on the team by you know 12 spots at the end of the season and is finishing
He
outside the
he
top
uh
15.
he Nolan Seagulls it essentially.
Exactly.
Is
Now,
what you're trying to dance around saying.
I would say I feel comfortable in I've been apprehensive with everything that we've talked about so far with him, but I would definitely say that I think that Malukas is a more talented driver than
I was going to
than
say
Siegel.
I'm not going to
So
make the comparison to him in terms of capability as Oscar Piastri, but it strikes me as him coming into a team like that at the time that Oscar did with McLaren. They were not in a brilliant spot, but 2, 3 years later, they're doing pretty darn well. Or at least they have the machinery, they have the capabilities for it. And Team Penske, I don't think they're as bad as McLaren were a few years ago. There's still
yeah,
quite a way for them to go on that front. But IndyCar's equivalent, maybe. And like you say, he's going to have standout moments, I think, next season. But he's going to have to play the team game more often than not, I think, especially when you've just got such experienced teammates that, okay, they didn't have great seasons themselves for of other reasons,
yeah, some
but
strange reasons. Yeah,
you're going to have trouble trying to pull rank on them as the new kid coming
yeah,
in as not a rookie, but for all intents and purposes, a rookie.
a rookie
So
for that
that's
team. Yeah,
it's going to be really interesting to see, and I feel like if you're there with your journey on with Malukas, I'm then coming in at the level you first came in with Malukas with Hauger at Dale Coyne, and then I've also got an eye on the other driver that you just reminded me of there with saying about what Malukas did in top machinery is Rasmussen, because I also wonder if the question then is we've seen what a driver like him can do with machinery that is perfectly good, but not Andretti, not Penske. But if you give a driver the top machinery, does that take something away from them because they're drivers that are better driving around potential obstacles within a car and eating the best out of it rather than you give them everything in a car and then they are maybe somewhat limited in a different way. You see that sometimes. It's very odd, but it's fascinating to see. And I wonder where that might play into things as well.
yeah. Well, another familiar name that is signing on to a new team is Rinus VK signing with Juncos Hollinger, which
Yeah,
isn't necessarily a new team. I think this is kind of more of a homecoming for him. But uh, I think Juncos Hollinger has made the right move in bringing him back at this point in his career, especially with the year that Rinus had. Um, I'm a little surprised he didn't get picked up by a little bit larger team. Um,
well, this is what I was going to ask you about because I didn't think he had the best season. Don't get me wrong, but he didn't have a terrible season either. And I did wonder why did he not decide to stay where he was and build up from there. I like it when teams and drivers have that kind of like, this isn't going to fix itself overnight, but we're going to build something in the same way that you can see AJ Foyt are doing with Ferrucci. And Veekay, like you say, is sort of going home, but then why did he leave in the first place? Has all of the reasoning for that been dealt with? So I was curious to get your thoughts on why is now the right time, and is he staying then properly? Is this now his forever home?
You know, if he has a season in 26 like he did in 25, he's only going to have the 1 year contract to Juncos Hollinger because he is going to move somewhere else. There's a lot of contracts that are already locked in for 2026 that expire at the end of the season
Hmm.
and or up for renegotiation. We thought we saw a lot of major moves at the end of this season. The end of next season is going to be an exciting one. And I think Renus is going to, if he can have the same, if he can improve on last year even more, he's going to be one of those drivers that's going to be picked up by one of these larger teams. Now, if he has kind of an even keel season, we'll say, maybe can string together, 4 or 5 top tens, get back on the podium again, then, he might end up getting an extension at Hilco Solinger. But
Well, the sounds of it, it
it
makes me think that it's up to him then if he would stay there. It's sort of what would please him enough to want to decide to stay rather than going somewhere else. And is getting back on the podium a few times enough of an incentive for him to decide to stay? Or is that him making good advert for himself and saying to McLaren, hey, do you want to maybe have me as the third driver there for 27? It feels less of a
yeah,
team decision rather than just he's once again seeing a better option. It'll be his third team in 3 years, sort of thing.
yeah, yeah. And I would hate to see him turn into and I don't mean this in a bad way, a journeyman driver like Connor Daly, where, every season it seems like he's with a new team
Hmm.
or, maybe gets a 2 year effort somewhere or, in a couple years, I don't want to say he burns out, but we only see him running the 500, you know, yeah, I hate to see that for him, but you also want him to, find that fit where, he fits in with a team that's in it for a long term and can sign multi-year contracts with them. And I think this will be quite frankly, if he has a breakout season where he can win a race or can string together a couple podiums, um, Juncos Hollinger might not be able to afford him at the end of the season. I mean, that could be another real thing as well that this is a team that's struggled financially in the not so distant past. So um it just depends. There's a lot of factors that go into it, obviously, but really looking forward to seeing what he can do this year.
We
A
also got the news
driver.
that
Oh, yeah. Oh, go
well,
ahead. You got a segue and I have a segue. I'll let you take the segue since I think you think more favorably of this driver than I do.
yeah, we got the news at the end of the season that Colton Herta was off to Formula One with Cadillac as a test and reserve driver, and it was all but confirmed that he was going to be racing in Formula Two next year.
Yes.
And as per usual, I have a lovely, elegant theory as to how all these pieces are going to fit together, and they shatter them accordingly with a sledgehammer. Because it's been announced that he's going to be racing with Hitech TGR in Formula Two. It's a strong team to join. I know you're not as across the European Feeder Series as you'd maybe like to be, but they're P2 at the moment in the Teams Championship this year. And at
Okay.
the time of recording, only a handful of points away from P1 overall, and there's 2 rounds, 4 races left to go, so they could still be on top there.
Sure.
So Prima have struggled across the board pretty much this season, regardless of where you follow them. So high tech makes a lot of sense for them and for him. And I think it's then leading into that potential of if you needed a second season for whatever reason, he has that stability and opportunity with them that he might not have with other teams. Prema famously do like to go for drivers that they think are up and coming and give them a good uh, option for moving on or getting rid of them if they think they're not up to scratch, regardless of what their own capabilities are as Hitech. I think sometimes they go for consistency more with that. I think if you've got a Cadillac behind a certain driver that's in your team as well, that doesn't hurt either. So that's going to be quite interesting to watch, I think. I know you're not as fussed, but that's shaping up to be a very interesting championship with a range of drivers next year. We've got
Mm.
three drivers coming into F2. We've got an IndyCar driver. We've got a couple of endurance drivers coming into single seaters for actually the first time. If not for the first time, then very limited running in single seaters
Sure,
who've just
sure.
decided they can come into it now. So it's a real battle of a bit of everything. So where he fits into it, with a strong team like that, is going to be quite interesting and potentially less of an excuse, for lack of a better phrase, for him to not do well.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, he's obviously a very talented driver. I give Colton a lot of
Clip that,
shit
put
here.
it on social media,
Yeah,
let it run.
yeah. I've given him a lot of grief over the years, and and a lot of people held him and so they hold him on a podium higher than a lot of other drivers. And for me personally, I just haven't seen that, and it's going to be nice to see him get back into for lack of a better term, a feeder series, um, and hone his craft in a different way. I think this is either going
Maybe
to be a
this is the
season
journey of how Nate and Colton come back together.
we become friends. You know, you know, it's either going to go one or two ways. He's going to have a standard F2 season where, he goes out and wins two or three races. The team wins, a team championship. Or he's going to go into that series and absolutely dominate and win, 13 out of 17 races. And, uh, we're going to be talking about him in a whole different light than what we did when we talked about him in IndyCar.
Hmm. I don't know which one I'm sort of expecting, to be honest, because we've not seen this before
Right.
in terms of a driver. It's like
A
seeing
top
someone
tier
from
driver for,
F1 go into
right.
Indy next. It doesn't, you don't see it. You just go
Yeah.
straight from one to the other.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really interesting to see. But something that also boggled the mind was this other driver announcement that we had a
Yeah.
bit of a laugh about when it was
Yeah.
when
When
the
it was
news broke.
announced. Yeah. Yeah. Marco Andretti retires from IndyCar, which I think both of us kind of figured he already had.
Yeah, the news for me was that he was still in a motorsport career up until that point in time. I hadn't really realised that. I obviously saw him in the Indy 500, I think, last
Uh,
season,
yeah.
but that was me just thinking that's just a guy going out having some fun. That's not me thinking
Yeah.
that's part of his active
Yeah.
racing career.
It's one thing to be like, Tony Kanaan is retired from IndyCar and then immediately went to go work for Arrow McLaren. And that Tony Kanaan has a fire suit and a helmet in
And
his
there
in
was the
his
potential
motorhome
for him
at every
to
single race. Yeah,
race in the 500 this season.
exactly. Yeah, and yeah, he's retired, but yeah, it was just kind of out of left field. It's like, oh, Marco Andretti retired. Well, I thought he already had.
The more confusing part for me as well, aside from that, was that when the announcement came, there was this video of Roger Penske, and I thought someone's died. It was black and white. It was very somber. I wasn't sure if it was him that had died himself, and it was something pre-recorded in case of
Pre-recorded.
the event of my death. And then he was saying about Andretti, and then I got mixed up with which Andretti he was referring to. I was like, oh no, Mario, no. And then I was like, oh, it's this is the news, right? Um, well, I talk about a complete deflation
Yeah,
and
right.
de-escalation
Yeah,
of a situation. So the whole thing was just handled very bizarrely for me.
yeah,
And I don't know if anyone took that in the way that it was intended.
yeah, yeah. It was a strange announcement all around. Just the video. You're right. The video they put out, it felt exactly like what you described. Like, oh, somebody has died, and
Hmm.
I saw the first time I saw it. I didn't watch it. I was scrolling through Facebook, and it was on the IndyCar Facebook page, and I'm scrolling through, and it was a black, like maybe it was black, Roger Penske in black and white. I'm like, what is happening? And scroll down further, and then somebody mentioned the announcement about Marco retiring. I'm like, that
Yeah, but
is
no, what's going on
huge.
here though? That's
Yeah,
not important right
yeah,
now. What's this
yeah,
about?
yeah. So, but in other Andretti news, Kyle Kirkwood has signed a contract extension over at Andretti. So, I thought, he still had a year left. I mean, he had a contract through 2026,
Hmm,
and then they sign a multi-year contract with him. I think, this is a case where, this team knows this is their future, and they want to lock him down for as long as they can. And,
that's what I was
uh,
thinking.
this contract now takes him through the 2028 season. So, into the new uh, uh, spec package for
You
IndyCar,
can you
and,
can you can tell they've got a really long term plan there because him locking in makes sense. He's the only driver from this season that we've just had that makes sense to stay there for the long term.
yeah,
Willpower, it's going to be his final team. I'll be
yeah,
surprised if he goes somewhere else after this. How long he's there for, I don't know, but it's a good, capable pair of hands that can maybe get another championship, can definitely get some more wins, and leave on a high. It's his Ferrari. If
mhm,
you're him
yeah.
being Lewis at
Lewis
Mercedes, he's
Hamilton,
gone off
yeah,
and he's got one more challenge,
yep,
and that's what he's going to do, and that's fine. And then I think Ericsson. This has got to be yet another prod towards the exit at the end of next season because Hauger has got to have absolutely atrocious season next year for him to not get that qualified. It's sort of
right,
David Malukas to Penske. What does he have to do to somehow shoot himself in the face to avoid this? It's
yeah,
going to be very difficult. But then you've got a very young talent there that you can develop. You've got the new Carl Kirkwood essentially,
mhm,
and you can use current Kirkwood to mentor new Kirkwood with Will Power overseeing everything.
yeah,
And then by the time that Power leaves, in theory, Hauger is up to speed. He's developed enough so that you can bring in the new next hotshot, whoever that
yeah,
is, and you've got a really
yeah,
nice development package. And as you say, if you've got Kirkwood there until at least the end of 28 with the new regs, the new car, and all that, that just makes sense. And it's nice to see a long term plan that you're not immediately questioning going, that's going to fall apart immediately, isn't it? This isn't Alpine. This is how you do a
yeah,
100 race
yeah.
plan if you were going to do it.
Yeah, and I think the outlook for that Andretti team is very set in stone. I mean,
Hmm.
what you just laid out there timeline wise, with Power, Ericsson, how Hauger definitely in the pipeline and will be at Andretti at some point. And I mean, I think we haven't seen him in an IndyCar yet, but in a race, but I think he's ready. He'll be ready
Hmm.
mid-season if they need him to move to that Andretti team at some point. So,
Yeah, I think so.
you know, that's a team that has a very clear vision of where they're going for the next several seasons. Um, and I want to segue that into the next bit here. A team that has been putting so many pieces into place, but has so little vision on where they're going. I feel like in the next couple of years, Louis Foster signing a contract extension with Ray Hall, Letterman, Lanigan Racing.
I've politely put that this move intrigues me. You were a little more colourful when I told you this because you hadn't seen the news yet. You were going, "What on earth is that about?"
Yeah,
And I think that is a lot of us because I've not got a problem with it, but I've got a problem with it, and I don't know how to describe it. He's a safe pair of hands. The team isn't bad, but it just doesn't seem like they know why they've done it, and if they do, they've not communicated about it well. And it seems that they may have been inspired by Andretti or by Penske in terms of we need to keep a stable set of drivers so that we can build towards where we want to go. But after talking to you for the last 2 years about IndyCar, that seems to just be their constant go-to phrase, and you'll go, yeah, but what is
yeah,
the thing that you're
yeah,
building towards?
yeah.
Because you're not any closer now than you were 2 years ago.
Right. And the thing is, it's always great to have a stable driver and know that you have a driver locked in for multi-year, but here's a team that has two drivers now that are, you know, with Foster and, quite frankly, the team owner's son, Graham, that is there forever. We don't know when Graham is going to retire. I have a feeling that it's sooner rather than later. I wouldn't be surprised if this is his last season and he becomes a 500 only driver,
Hmm.
um, and can
But then
go
I'd like
the
to see what the vision is for the future
go
beyond
go
that.
go the Marco route and just run the 500 and then announce that you're retired. And we're like, we thought you already retired, Graham.
So
Um,
between now and St. Peter, I'm going to be keeping an eye on all these other drivers that I thought were already retired and going, right, are you guys
yeah,
active still? I don't want to be sideswiped by this again.
yeah, and there's some team announcements that we'll get to with in regards to Ray Hall, Letterman, Lanigan, for all these pieces they're putting in place, like a major team would do, and it's like it, I don't know what their end game is. I mean, like I mentioned, we know what Andretti's working towards. We know where that team's going,
Hmm.
and this one it just boggles me that one, the team has enough money to lock a driver like Louis Foster into a multi-year deal that takes him through to the 2028 season, but also they have the funding to put all these other pieces in place. But it's like they're showing no advancement. You know,
Hmm.
we're talking about the same Ray Hall, Letterman, Lanigan team that we were,
It feels a little
a
bit
few
to
years
me
ago.
like Haas in F1. They keep
Yes,
doing interesting and
exactly.
good things, but you don't see real progress from one
Yeah,
year to the other. You have a good year and then you go down again. You go up and then you go in summer and
yeah,
you go, but yeah, but what is your plan here? It's not quite clear. We love it when you do well, but we just love it if you could tell us what your actual ambitions here are, because we're not
yeah,
sure.
yeah. It would be like if we gave, $50 million to Dale Coyne and said, "Hey, put together the best team you can," and then they're like, "Oh, well, we're going to have our son drive, and we're going to uh, we're gonna pick up Catherine Legg, and uh, so it's like it, you're spending an awful lot of money to build a team, but you're not building a team that has a vision of where it wants to be in a few years. It feels like
Mm.
so I was just perplexed by this multi-year signing of Louis Foster. Not taking anything away from Louis Foster. Obviously, he was the best driver on this team this past season. And yeah, you want to lock a good driver into a multi-year deal, but I mean, at whose benefit? I mean, after three, we got 3 more years of Louis Foster at this team, and if this team as a whole can't improve around him, it's almost like we've wasted 3 years of this driver's talent. We just we have to figure out where Louis Foster fits in, with this team. It's just kind of a uh,
So it feels like they want him there so they can build into something. It's so that someone else doesn't poach him, and they've told him enough to convince him that that is the place to stay. But in terms of what that is and what that would be, even vaguely look like, no one outside of the team, and we're assuming the team themselves know, have an idea of what that vision is.
yeah,
And that's the perplexing thing. I know I like to make my F1 comparisons, but you see what Williams have. They go, we know what we're trying to do here. You look at Alpine and you go, we have no idea what you're doing, but we know you at least are scrambling around the dark trying to do something, and you just reset every 5 minutes. So there's concepts of a plan there. But then, like I say, you look at Haas and you're not doing badly. You're not doing well, but we just don't know. You've been here a while now in the grand scheme of things. What is it that you're trying to achieve? And don't just say winning, because you kind of figured that. That's kind of why we're all here. But specifically, one year to the next, you ask James Vowles at head of Williams, what's the plan for this season? What are you happy with? What are you not going to be happy with? He's got answers for everything. He'll go after a race weekend and go, that was good, this was bad, da 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 da. I don't feel like we have any of this with this team here in IndyCar. So I would love to know what they told him, and if I get a chance to speak with Louis Foster anytime in the near future, I may find a more polite way of asking.
well, a bit of driver news that I think you probably uh, were happy with. I'll let you introduce this one.
Happy, but perplexed at the same time in a different way. Collett was announced to be racing with AJ Foyt Racing for next season, obviously replacing Dave Malukas. And good to see that we've got another Indy Next driver coming into IndyCar. He did a fairly decent job, I will
Mhm.
put it mildly, this season. Uh, and I know him from his time in F2 and F3. But the thing that frustrates me the most is that naturally, the dude who finishes second gets a potentially better seat in IndyCar than the champion does. What
For
is
the
this? What is?
season.
What do I think
Yeah.
this is? F1, where the guy that comes 10th can suddenly be in a top team. What's that about? So, if I were Dennis Hauger, I'd be a little bit annoyed. And we now have a potentially more interesting Indy Next graduate battle for 26 than we did in 25. We had Foster versus Abel this year. Don't know
Yeah.
how much of a fight that really
It
was.
really was.
This
Yeah.
time, we've got Collett, who does have a point to prove in, I would argue, better machinery. But then we've got one of my favourite underdog potential stories coming through, and I'm not going to say it's a Rocky v Fleet situation, nowhere near, because that's probably giving a bit too much weight on Kyle Collett's ability. But it's not far off either. It's very interesting to see how those two are going to match up against each other and what happens when they finally get to each other on the same bit of track, especially on an oval. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that choice of team that was the most interesting thing to me. I
Mm.
kind of always watching him this past season. I saw that Collette definitely had there was a spark there that you could see when you look at a driver and you say, okay, that's going to be a top tier driver one of these days. Maybe not next year, but some team's going to pick him up and make an IndyCar driver out of him. Uh, AJ Foyt was probably the last team that I would have thought would have been that team to say, okay, this is going to be an IndyCar
Well,
driver.
because you assumed, no offense to Colette, that they'd choose someone either more experienced or better, you
Yeah.
know. So that was why it was flexing. You'd be thinking, oh, it's going to be Juncos Hollinger or Dale Coyne or Kramer,
Yeah.
one of these teams. You're not thinking solid midfield to kind of graduated top tier team that's going for this, who needs to replace Dave Malukas, who again wasn't a slouch. It's big shoes to fill for a
Yeah.
rookie. So very interested to see how that goes. And again, the inter-team battle there as well, because Collette isn't team racing driver, to borrow a well-known phrase, and Ferrucci isn't exactly a pussycat either,
Yeah.
regardless with any one of who he comes to on the track. So that's going to be very intriguing for me.
Yeah. We had an announcement last week that Ryan Hunter-Reay had been selected to race for Arrow McLaren in the Indy 500 next year. This kind of piggybacks on the news that kind of came on the heels of. I'm like, kind of goes back to like, okay, these teams that have these Indy 500 cars, a lot of times we don't find out until you know three
The
weeks
week
into
of.
April that they're like, oh yeah, by the way, we found somebody to race this car for us. I don't remember in recent past of teams announcing these 500 only drivers so early before the 500. I mean, early before the 500 is the month of April, usually for these one-off drives. And here we had two of them
I,
almost
I wonder
back to
how much of
back.
this is Fox's influence in terms of broadcasting and promotion and getting ahead of these sorts of things to make sure that they can have all the marketing down pat as early as possible, so that when the
Yeah.
time comes, they can just roll it out and go, yeah, we've had the announcement. We can start build. Even the off season's long, but we can build the anticipation, the excitement for arguably the biggest event of the season and one of the biggest events in American sport. Never mind
Yeah.
motorsport. 6 months out, and
Yeah.
just have it trickle up that way.
Yeah. An interesting point I'll bring up, and this kind of piggybacks on that is every year I buy the Indy 500 program, and one of these days I'm going to send you one just so you can have it and hold it and go through it. It's not like a standard race program. It's almost a book. I mean, it's 150 pages, and there's great stories in it, but they always have driver bios in there. Now, obviously, they know that every driver that's on, that's racing a full season is going to be, in the 500.
Mm.
But in the past, like I said, we've always had these drivers that they announce at the end of April, the first week of May, that are going to be racing, attempting to race the 500. And when they make these programs, they're making 350,000 of them, and you can't
You want to
just
make sure that you've got everything in
you
advance.
can't just print a 150-page program of that quality at the last minute. And so you get driver bios in there of guys that are like, Helio Castroneves that they might not announce until the last minute, or Catherine Legg. She's
Mm.
been in the last several Indy 500 programs because it's like, oh, it's possible that some team's going to pick her up. She's been here in the past, and she's
You wonder,
a
is
talent
it a
driver.
kind of a pre-official announcement, or is it them just trying to cover their bases
They're
and
just
say,
trying to cover their
let's
bases,
hope?
and that's how it's always been in the past. But now it's like, you know, these drivers we already know. We've got Jack Harvey, who's very capable at the Motor Speedway, and then past champion Ryan Hunter-Reay that's already been announced. 8 months ahead of the fact. It's like there's going to be not very many pieces of that puzzle left by the time we get to May, if any at
Mm.
all,
Yeah, and
which is very
I
uncharacteristic.
don't mind that, but it's an interesting departure, like you say, from what you're used to. And I think the only people that are definitely going to be relieved about it is people that make the 150-page book, as you say.
That's right. That's right. So, and that's actually, it was, from what I read, that is a multi-year 8,500 deal with them. That they signed him for the 2027 Indy 500 as well. Now, I'm sure
Again,
there's,
the people making the book can be extra happy with that. They can already get
now,
started on that.
I don't know whether there's a clause in his contract that says, hey, if I go out and win the Indy 500 for you in 2026, like, quite honestly, he almost pulled off this past year.
Mm.
An ill-timed, fuel strategy pit stop near the end of the race that really ruined the day for him. But if he goes out and wins the race next year, is he going to be available for a one race offer in 2027?
Yeah,
Is he going to be able to get out
again,
of that to go race
what's his
for
plan?
driving
Does he
around
want
for
to?
a full season? Yeah.
Well, well, that'd be the amusing thing, wouldn't it? Go and race for one of these other teams for the rest of the season, but then 500. Sorry, guys, I've got to go switch back
I
to
gotta
her
go.
McLaren.
And Harold McLaren's already got themselves in a court case over drivers leaving and not fulfilling contracts. So
Well, maybe the lawyers for this one are double, triple checking everything in that contract. Oh, we're not doing this again.
that is ironclad. Yeah, he is definitely racing there in 2027. So another interesting bit of driver news that I came across this week was uh, uh, Trackhouse Racing over in NASCAR, who's quickly become, I would say, a top tier team in NASCAR, and their rise has been
Mm.
uh, pretty noteworthy, I think, in that sport. They're bringing Connor Zilic in from Xfinity Racing into the big leagues next year, but they've come out and said, we'd really like to get Connor Zilic a ride in the 500, and you know,
Then Carl
I,
Larson for this.
yes, that's right, and uh, I think it's interesting that they're already coming out and saying even before this kid has raced a full season in NASCAR, and the kid's only 19 years old and
Mm.
has already proven that he is capable. I would say he's on the same level as Kyle Larson in being able to adapt to tracks and go to tracks that he's never raced on before and very
And
easily
he's young
figure
enough
out the
still,
racetrack.
like you say. He's got that advantage of he's not been embedded in the series for 20 years or anything like
Yeah, it's
this.
not like Jimmy
He's still
Johnson coming over.
confident.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
yeah, Trackhouse Racing is a Chevy team, Chevy back team, and so you know, you have he's not going to come over here and race for a one race deal at Dale Coyne for the 500. He's not going to come over and race for a small team. He's going to be going to a Penske or an Arrow McLaren that races
Well,
Chevy package. So
I've got a theory I've just thought of, which would make you very happy if it comes true. They go to Penske and they say, "Hey, do you mind running an extra car?" And they obviously have listened to this podcast and they've listened to you and they go, sure, if you let Mr. McLaughlin here have a go in one of the big NASCAR races and
That's
then we have a
right.
nice crossover period. Maybe that's what they did.
Yeah. And I think with Fox being, partial owner in the series now, I think we might see more of that
So there's more
in
potential
trying
for
to
crossover.
in trying to lure NASCAR drivers, which is now, it's still, the broadcast rights for NASCAR are still split between Fox and NBC, but kind of, Fox trying to take one more stick in the side of NBC and be like, hey, we're going to take this driver for the weekend and we're going to do, this will be our weekend because we're pulling one of your drivers out of a race to bring him to our side.
I mean, this is the wider point that maybe is worth a podcast of its own at some point down the line, but maybe that's also part of the battle for traditional media to stay alive and stay relevant and stay big these days.
Yeah,
You've got to go hunting in terms of what was before. There's plenty of space here for all of us, but there's so
yeah.
much damn competition with streaming services now that they've got to just go and say, sorry, NBC, we're doing this
Mhm.
because we're pretty big, sure, and there is
Yeah.
a lot going on, but we can't afford to rest on our laurels or hope that
Mhm.
things as they are is going to be good enough to sustain us in the future. We don't know what's around the corner,
Yeah.
especially for network television and the traditional kind of cable network channels. So I wonder if that's part of it as well, and maybe it's half hunting, half let's team up a little bit too, and maybe we can find something that's in this for you, and it's a way
Yeah.
of trying to sustain everyone a bit longer.
Yeah. And I think, both NBC and Fox are, they're media businesses. They are probably very good at fabricating stories or molding something to create a storyline.
And so
And
controlling narratives and shaping them.
and I don't know what the NASCAR schedule looks like for the next couple of years. And the way that they run that is, Fox runs NASCAR races one half of the year, and then we get to the 4th of July and it switches over to the other broadcast. And it rotates back and forth each year, I think. So each you have a year, but it's the back half of one year and then the front half of the next year or something like that. And so I think they'll probably wait to kind of push that double header until a season where Fox has the Coke 600 and the Indy 500 on the same day, and they can
Hmm.
just follow him with a camera and say they'll get on the helicopter with him and they'll get on the plane with him and then they'll
They'll keep the CW happy as well then because they'll have their Road to Indy series maybe come back and then they've got an exclusive
that's
thing
right.
there. They can follow him around,
Yep.
stick that on there, and have
Yeah.
a big cross
That's right.
promotion.
Yeah.
Sorts itself out.
Yeah.
That's it for part 1. Come back for part 2, where Nate and I will be talking about behind the scenes changes in IndyCar, the 2026 calendar, and more. We'll see you then.